So yeah, thanks for the intro, Steve, and nice to be asked to speak to this PDMA group again. Steve mentioned the product camp. I've spoken at that several times. It's a great event, and I'd like to just emphasize sometimes you hear those things and they sound like a conference. And Dave Mathias, who's been a part of that in Minneapolis forever, he always would say it's the unconference. It's really focused on, topics that you want to hear, and it's by vote of who gets to speak. And it's very much reversed process-wise compared to a normal conference. So whatever topics are there, ones that the group that are intending to attend, that they're interested in. So it's a really cool setup and a great networking and very educational event. So when that happens in September, and Proto Labs is impressive. I've toured that before, and that's worth seeing in itself. So great opportunity there coming up. So I'm going to go full screen. And again, as Steve said, throw out questions. If you hit unmute, I won't be offended. Usually people don't like to do that. So if you throw it in the chat, that's certainly fine as well. And Steve will keep an eye on that for us. Steve talked about my background. It's engineering background, a lot of time in new product development. And then pretty quickly got into project management and did big projects, small projects, but sometimes dual hat, designer and project manager, and sometimes pure project manager hat. And then for the last 18 years, I've been consulting in R&D, upstream product development activities. And when Steve and I were talking about a presentation to the group, I always like to have my topics to be fresh, to be something new that I haven't done before. So this is another one of those. And I was trying to think about how to organize it and where to focus. And then ended up, I had a couple ideas, and when I pulled it back, it's like, well, let's just talk about learning cycles, because that's kind of a common theme between a couple of these things. And we can kind of expand out that topic that way. And it's I think a little bit broader than just new product development learning cycles. It's learning about your new product and how do we learn faster, better, and how does that help us as a business? Because whether it helps development or not, it's a different question. I'm really trying to dial back. Is this helping the business? Is this helping the product? And so kind of maybe a little bit different view than maybe you might be used to on this type of topic. And anytime I talk, I always share my contact info. So that's my mobile, text. If you have something, obviously my email for my business is there as well. Email questions, comments, thoughts, requests for the slides, whatever. I'm also on Twitter, and I think that my Twitter handle is at the end of the presentation. So always feel welcome to reach out. I actually spoke in Anaheim recently on a different topic, and someone actually just emailed me today asking for the slides from that discussion. So just always feel free to reach out. I think product development is fun. So and this was really in the summary that Steve showed already, but really the agenda floats into these three, to me, key areas, in my opinion, of big impact and also big opportunities for learning. And at high level is project risk, marketing testing, and strategic testing when you're in development itself. And so project risk is something that starts, and we're going to obviously expand each one of these three. But project risk is something that starts right away on a project. It's something that you can think about and deal with right away. Some organizations only talk about risk, so-called during development, and focused on the design that you have or the process that you have, manufacturing process, say. But those risks are really too narrow and too late. So we'll talk more about that, but that's really upstream in the planning before development's even starting. and how do we think about our learning cycles? And it's really driven from that. And when it's done well, it can drive quite a bit uh, in your organization. And the second bullet or second bucket is doing marketing testing. And in the networking intros, a lot of product manager types. So it's not an engineering focused only group. And so this, I think, will help some interest in that area. There's something that I think is familiar in the marketing world, at least, something called A/B testing. And A/B, again, we'll talk about what that is, but I don't think A/B testing does enough of the story, but it's a very common thing. So I'm looking at things that people do common design risk or A/B testing, which really doesn't do enough. There's ways to really accelerate things and learn more by doing it differently. And then the third bullet really kind of spins into the design experiments topic, as Steve mentioned, I've been working on for a bunch of years now. And I call it here strategic testing because design experiments is one aspect of testing, but there's you just be strategic in how you set up your test plans. And so sometimes people hear design experiments and they think, oh, I'm going to plan a test, so I designed an experiment. And that's really not what I'm talking about with design experiments. What the strategic testing really is that that more broad view of it. And what tests can be combined, what need to be at high level, what at a low level of testing. If it is a low level of testing, you're really trying to learn what is often called the one factor at a time testing approach is very limited in your technical understanding. And I have a lot of content on my website about design of experiments and what that really means. So with that said, let's jump into that first topic, which is project risk. And I think it's important to learn or understand about what risk is before we talk about project risk. And to me, it's anything with uncertainty. If there's uncertainty, there's a risk when you're trying to execute. And if we're doing a new product or we have a new idea, new business model, we haven't done it before, and so we don't know what to expect. There is some degree of uncertainty. Risks are things that have not happened yet. If a risk opportunity actually shows up, it's often called an issue or a situation, whatever language you want to plug to it. But risks are things that haven't happened yet, but could, we're just uncertain about them. Unless you've done the exact same thing before successfully, there's some uncertainty that exists. The challenge that I find a lot with just in general with the risk topic is if I'm talking to someone about risk, they personally don't have any, but everyone around them does. And so if you're just trying to uncover their risk, you're just battling upstream. You really need to talk about whether it's other aspects of the projects they're on, which they'll do automatically, or the nice way to talk about is a project like this that happened recently, what could have been done better? Or, what happened there? What surprises happened? And that's a way to kind of talk about potential issues. And I actually try to avoid the word risk. It's just, what happens? Again, depending upon how I'm exactly having the conversation, but basically, why are you so smart that certain things won't happen, but someone less skilled than you, they might struggle with it. And it's kind of a nice way to not put the pressure on them, because sometimes risk discussions come across as you're going to screw up, and how are you going to screw up, and how are we going to avoid it? And that's just not a pleasant way to get people to talk openly. So I like to talk about, again, past projects or other aspects of the project, things like that, or things they know they won't have a problem with because of their experience or some special process they'll use. So that's general risk. I talk about project risk because most organizations, if they talk about risk at all, they only focus on product or the technical risks, the ability to meet the technical, say, marketing requirements. But we also have risks from a business side of our cost and our schedule risks. The cost can be product cost or development cost. And then the development schedule is the other part of the risk. Or you could have just schedule, to build that actual product. There's risks in all those areas beyond just a pure technical risk. We can do a lot of things technically, but is there a cost or schedule impact? The challenge is a lot of our tools are focused on the product risks, doing stuff in those other areas. It's like, well, I barely know what my technical risks are, so how do I understand cost and schedule risks? In general, the product risks feed into the cost and schedule uncertainty. So something that's a high technical risk might take longer, might cost more, take more prototypes, take more people. And so you can kind of start seeing there's a window of a cost or schedule estimate. The other thing, which I've done before, is to take those cost and schedule risks and put it into a Monte Carlo analysis and to really get a statistical confidence of what your likelihood of success is. And I've done talks on that topic to other groups that's also on my website. So if you're looking for triggers of what might a project risk be, I did not create this list. I simply simplified it or summarized it from Carnegie Mellon, a report. And this report goes back decades at this point, but it's still available. I did verify this this week before this presentation. And I think it's 3 total slides. So let me kind of give you a flavor of each of these areas. The first one is requirements risk. Are the requirements stable, or are they in flux somehow? Are they complete where you need to ask more questions to really know, to be able to get started on your development work? Are the requirements clear? Or is there some they may be seemingly complete, but if they're not clear from person to person, that difference in interpretation can change the effort and change the risk involved. And you can read the rest of those things under requirements. So there's a huge bucket of concerns, potential risks on requirements. And then what about the design itself? What are the functions that we're expecting to create? What's the difficulty in that design effort to make that technology happen or that user interface happen? What are the interfaces within our design, external to our design? And again, things like performance levels, testability, different constraints like weight, volume. There can be different things like that that drive it, that may not be a specific requirement, but really impact our design. The ability to integrate our components together and test them out. Those are areas of risk that are certainly beyond both design and process areas. I've done a bit of work where, say it's on an electrical board, do we really have the ability to troubleshoot our high-risk components, things that may not work right or that we want to learn about, make sure and design accessibility for, say, test probes to be implemented. And engineering specialties such as, can you maintain it? Is it reliable? Is it available? Safety, security, human factors, and so on. Then we can get into other, a little bit higher level aspects. What's the development process that we're using? Is it a formal process? Is it suitable for our project? Maybe you're using a great, very formal system like NASA would use, but you're on a 2 or 3 month project. It's just not suitable. It's a different scale. Is the process familiar with your team, or they need some training? So there's a lot of things that are risks for your project that just come from the process. And then there's the system itself. Do you have the capacity? Whether it's people or equipment, Are those system or those tools usable, familiar? Are they supported? So again, a lot of things that aren't about your technical capability, but the things that allow you to do your job. Then we get into management. What's your planning process? What's your organizational structure? Do people know what it is? Are the right people in the right seats? What's the experience? And again, whether it's a management team or development team, if it's a new team versus an experienced team or internal experienced team, understanding that gives you some either confidence or some uncertainty. And then management methods, how you're managing personnel, quality assurance, configuration management, those kind of things with, again, just managing and monitoring the overall process. And then last slide, the work environment, the attitude of the people, cooperation of the team, communication, morale. Excuse me, sorry. Still got a cough from last week. We look at the resources. Do we have enough time in our schedule? Do we have the right staff? Is our budget, basically our dollars behind it adequate? Are the facilities we have, whether it's manufacturing, test, development, could be security reasons. Is our facilities appropriate for our people? And then the very last one, program interfaces. So how are you communicating with customers, suppliers, vendors? Is there political things involved? When I did a lot of my project management work, it was in the defense industry. And obviously politics is a huge part of our nearly everyday conversation for a large project. So that it's just triggers, you may say, oh, I think we got this managed. I'm fine. Just to me, list all the things under, say, work environment that you're doing well and why it's a low risk. I like to call it taking credit for the work you've done, why you're doing things smartly. So then when there's some high risk things, you go, well, at least we have this foundation, and with that foundation, we can manage these risks. But if everything you talk about is only a high risk and it's a red on the chart, that's a little bit demotivating to teams. Any thoughts or comments people want to make on risk before I move to the next area?
I dropped it in the chat, but I was wondering how you work with positive risks. A lot of times when we're talking about risks, we're talking about things that go wrong, but there are often things that go right, unexpected things that go right.
Yeah, that doesn't really happen. I'm just being a little bit sarcastic, but
I've seen it happen once or twice, but you're right. 99% of the time it's things that go wrong. But a new technology pops up that you can actually integrate into your product.
I've sat in classes that have talked about risk as a positive opportunity. And I'm just going to be direct. I basically called bullshit on the instructor because I said, our whole project plan is optimistic and positive. We are looking for the opportunity here. So, that's what we've planned to do is optimistic stuff. And what we really need to focus our efforts on, because people are excited about that and they're going to take action on that kind of naturally. But when the shit hits the fan, what are you going to do about it? And when do you need to monitor it? And good things will happen, but we don't need to manage those. We really need to manage and mitigate the bad things that can throw us off track. That's been my experience.
Yeah. Okay. If I were to jump in just a second, I work in an industry that builds a risk management software. And what Perry is saying is absolutely right. But you are always taking a project or work or business, right? That's your positive outtake. But anything that you do has a lot of different risks. For example, if you're in a hurricane zone, you have hurricane happening and something happens to your facilities and operation, it's not working, right? All of those things. So that's more operational side of risk. And the same applies to the projects.
Thanks for adding that, Pete. In fact, it's there's and I forget their exact size, but you know, moderate size, small company here in Minneapolis, which is where I'm based out of. And a friend of mine, long experienced, his dad, long experienced engineer. So he's highly respected, and I've always respected him. He was part of their company's disaster recovery planning team. So it's a engineering and manufacturing based company, but they were looking at everything. And so just like Pete said, you know, hurricanes, typhoons, snowstorms, ice storms, whatever it might be, they were trying to cover all the different things and how they'd handle it. And of course, he told me this in 2020. He said, and you know what? We did not have a pandemic on our list. You know, how many people did? So yeah, you can talk about all the positive, cool things, but people enjoy talking about that. They don't like talking about the disasters and the hard stuff. And then despite that, how you'd recover from them, because you go, if our sole source supplier in the Philippines gets wiped out, which has happened to me before, then what do? Well, we're in trouble. I mean, there's not a great answer. And it takes a lot of work to get that addressed. And that's basically my point. So
yeah, it does make sense. But often when we start talking about risk, we're talking about all the gloom and doom.
And that's why I tend to
go right.
Yeah, and if we talk too much about the gloom and doom, in particular, if we focus it at the person we're talking with, that's why people don't like talking about risk. But it's kind of, again, I like to call it taking credit for the smart stuff we have done that does reduce risk. If there is a high risk and we have a really cool plan that's going to make it go away, that's kind of the upside and the positive side of, hey, what if we hire this person or use this special tool that can help us develop better, quicker? Yeah, it's an opportunity, but it's the opportunity of reducing that risk to execute our project plan.
Yeah.
And then it's celebrating so-called those wins when you do reduce the risk. It's not keep beating on the high risk. It's like, hey, we did some cool stuff and we fixed this. This was high risk, and 6 months later, this is not a big deal anymore. We tested it, customers happy, we're ready to roll. And it's a very different positive mindset that way, instead of just beating that risk horse over the head.
Yeah, I think there's this negative connotation attached to the risk, but if you're a business, you want to make sure like and you are continuing to operate and have all the bells and whistles. So none of your job, all the people who are working for you, or even the concept of business is not lost, right? So that's what comes out. It's just like you and I when we take health car insurance, right, to drive our car. We have insurance for our house. Is it because we want our house to flood? No, it's because in adverse event that may happen, right?
Yeah. And so your point is right. It's something good happening is not going to sink your project. Yeah, it's the bad stuff that's going to sink. So
yeah. Well, why don't we jump on? I appreciate the comments, Brent and Pete, and whoever else may have chimed in or certainly thought in the background. So I want to hit this one. This was going to be the focus of my talk, and then I realized I don't have enough here to talk about only on this. But the marketing area, there's the opportunity to learn, because what does a company know about their customers and about their market? There's been a lot of talk over the last few decades of voice of customer and user experience and a lot of things like that. Frankly, in my time as a consultant, I've talked to a lot of marketing consultants of basically how can I market what I do better? And almost without fail, they all have a magic silver bullet because it's the best approach. And I experiment with all of them, and they really aren't that great. I've never found so-called the silver bullet that was promised by these other consultants. And so what I'd simply say is context matters. There's a school of thought called behavioral science, which is actually a Nobel Prize winning field, where it started, and actually started in, I was gonna say finance or something along that lines. Anyway, I'll get back to that. Anyway, I don't think we always do know the best approach, but a lot of times in marketing, because doing marketing testing is hard. They come across with, we already know the right answer, the best answer, so we're just going to lock that in. But I think it's important to really to explore and to learn in our marketing early, so we have the right requirements to reduce that risk, and to guide the development as we have prototypes, whether it's alpha, beta units, that we're getting feedback and learning about the market. And then also to understand the combinations of things, and that'll show up in the next couple of slides. So this common method that I said in the overview is something called A/B testing. And what is it? Very simply, it's a method of comparison testing. When to use it, I call it a pick the winner type of approach. You test configuration A and configuration B, whatever that might be, and which one's better. And you do enough to know statistically that you have some confidence that B is better than A or A is better than B. So in a more statistical world, might be like a t-test or proportion test. That's really all an A/B test is a simple comparison test. What do we tend to measure in marketing? In this day and age with social media and those types of things, we typically measure clicks. Did people click on our thing? And if they did, that's a positive. And if not, then it's an issue. But ideally, I'll tell you as a business owner, I kind of like cash. I've had a lot of startup organizations promise me stock options. I said, well, if we blend it with cash, we can talk. But if you don't have cash to offer, I know what your business plan is. I know you haven't assessed your risks well. I'm really not interested in your stock options. And so I haven't done much work with, I've done a few startups, but most of them have no hope and no future, and they flame out usually 6 to 9 months after I first talked to them, because they don't have enough going. So cash is king. What are the weaknesses of A/B testing in the marketing world? You can burn through a lot of your potential clients with a less effective marketing approach than is possible. And if you're burning through potential clients, that's not good. But if you burn through them and you don't learn that much or have limited learning, that's even worse. And then what about, I like to use the word dependencies, but what about combinations? And we'll see what those combinations are like in the example I give. So let's say that we're doing an A/B test on comparing 2 different emails. And I've done this with my business. You can also do it with mailings, which I've done, whether it's some sort of marketing message, a little bit more involved than an email, or comparing websites, but different colors, different pictures that you may use, different content. Maybe it's the length of the content. Maybe it's the titles that you use, say in the subject line of an email or the banner on a magazine article. There's a lot that could be understood. An A/B test is only going to look at red versus blue, and that's all that they're going to learn about and burn through a good chunk of your market. But what else might matter beyond this obvious message itself? What geography are you sharing this with? Are you sharing it East Coast or West Coast or Midwest? What time of day is best? Are you, is it early morning, midday, early afternoon? And I've actually heard some people that late day, they actually were having success with certain things, which I was not expecting. And then day of the week. I've heard from certain marketing people, yeah, you always want Tuesdays, but I've actually done testing to prove that out for my environment in Minneapolis, because most of my connections are Minneapolis based. I have them throughout the US and actually throughout the world, but primarily I'm a Midwest company. So what day of the week works here? And again, it can be different in different geographies. So there's a lot, and that's what I mean by dependencies, or what about combinations? Maybe Monday late works better than Tuesday early. So it's those combinations, and not just early in the day is always good. I'll tell you, late in the day Friday would be a disaster, particularly in the summer in Minnesota. So think about the A/B testing and execution. Sometimes people use the word arms. You need to have several arms to a study to create some balance and ensure you're learning. And let's say in marketing point of view, you're usually talking single digit responses. So I've seen different cases with using 400 emails, let's say, or touch points to get a good response rate to be confident in your 3% or 6% or whatever response you might get. And then we need to make sure we're doing this in a window of time which is neutral. Be careful of doing it during a blizzard or during a heat wave, because that could influence getting the type of, you might get comparative answers, but you might not get the best response. So we pick that neutral window of time, say it's a Tuesday morning, and we do 400 of color A, 400 of color B to see what's best. Then once we do that, that was East Coast. Now we got to repeat that on the West Coast. So you can see kind of the inefficiency and the slow gradual learning, which would take place with A/B testing. And again, once you do that, then you need to exploit the learning with the balance or the rest of your contact list. How many may be on a contact list? I know a particularly successful consultant that has a mailing list of 4,000 people. And I will tell you, that's huge. That's a lot of people. But let's even assume that you're this highly successful person or business. We just did 400A and 400B. Then we did West Coast. That's 1,600 contacts we made of our 4,000. So only 2,400 remain. We almost burned through half of it to get some sort of confidence. And again, my guess, very few have a list of 4,000. If you're business to business, you're not talking even hundreds or thousands. You're talking very targeted customer list. And then whatever you do in this first phase of testing, and then you run that campaign, future campaigns, you want to use a different set of people to learn from. You don't want to keep hammering the first set of learning prospects. So if A/B by itself isn't that efficient, how can you get to that exploitation phase faster? And there's something called Thompson sampling, and I have not used it, but I'm trying to boil down here for you everything I've read on the web and videos I've seen. They're horrible explanations. I've seen good ones, and so I'm trying to mimic that here. It's basically an adaptive method of testing to decide on your next test condition based on the likelihood of success. So it may be an A/B setup, red and blue, and then you have no likelihood of one being better than the other. Let's say you do a couple of blue and a couple red. Both red were good and only one blue was good. Well, then your next test is going to be red because that's showing previous, like not statistically significant yet, but it's showing a likelihood to be 2 for 2 instead of 1 for 1. Or 1 out of 2, and then you move forward. But if the next couple of reds end up failing, now red is 50-50 and blue's 50-50, maybe you give blue another chance again. So it's a kind of a dynamic move as you go, very adaptive method. So it's a way to move quickly to exploiting potentially better methods, but it's only potentially better methods. It's not proven better methods. So the weakness is it's not balanced. A lot of times in testing for confidence reasons, we want, if not equal, at least similar numbers in both the blue and the red group, the East Coast and West Coast group. Again, it doesn't have confidence we made the right choice. It just gets to exploitation quicker. It certainly has the ability to give up on a better solution too early. It's not obvious how you would optimize multiple outcomes. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then the last bullet here is it's fundamentally not accepted by FDA to use a technique like this.
Hey, can I jump in real quick? There's a chat comment from Andreas.
Yeah.
Andreas, would you mind sharing your thought?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm totally on your line here, talking about A/B testing and really all testing that can be done. And I have the feeling that lean startup really is doing us a disservice because it gives this impression as an entrepreneur, hey, you just do quick iterative testing and you learn enough to go to the next stage. And entrepreneurs just, they don't realize, one, they may do the wrong test. Two, they do the wrong learning or draw the wrong conclusions. And so lean startup is it can be dangerous in that sense.
That's a good point, because we want to quicken the learning cycles, but we want to make sure we're actually learning.
Right.
Awesome point. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, Andreas, because those of us who are thinking about learning and learning early, the lean startup model is one that's in front of a lot of people's mind. You know, what Eric Ries wrote about learning cycles and trying to put that customer feedback loop and learning cycles into your early development practice to end up with your, minimum viable product, I think is something that a lot of people understand. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And thanks for letting me know that one, Steve. So here's a couple examples that I've seen just clicking through the internet, just about Thompson sampling. The most common one is what they call the one-armed bandit. So it's a slot machine in Vegas. But their outcome is, do I get a coin or not? Well, if you get a coin constantly, that's entertainment, but you're probably losing money. There's no, you're not truly maybe gaining from the process. Maybe we should be measuring total payout, but how often do you get that that big payout? That's pretty rare. And total payout versus a big payout, the measurement matters so much. It's not the method, the AB method or Thompson method. How are you testing? What are your actual output measurements? And then being smart about that. Another one that they use a similar argument of Thompson sampling with was picking a restaurant to eat at, and their criteria was satisfaction. Were you satisfied at that restaurant? Is that really the best restaurant criteria? What if you're in a hurry and you need something quick? That's going to be a different restaurant choice. Or what if cost is an issue? You're kind of on a budget, or you're bringing the kids, or whatever it might be. What's maybe a more cost-effective one? The ultimate satisfaction, I can tell you, it's going to be great, but it's going to be, $300-400 for a couple. So, how are we measuring it? And the Thompson sampling is a quick single measure type optimization. And similar things, again, with social media. Clicks is common, but is that the best measure of engagement? Is really likes of your comment the best? Or if people do comment, what if they actually call you and talk about hiring you? I mean, from my consulting point of view, that's the ultimate. I'd like a call, but even better, I'd probably like a meeting get booked to sit down with them. Even better, revenue gets generated from that engagement. So we got to think about what's the smartest measure before we start thinking about A/B testing is going to help us learn, and then we do these kind of things that are, click or do I get a coin out of the slot machine orientated. Some words that I got out of this this process of digging around, and I think this is really important for not just marketing, but in general for development. They talked about the explore phase and the exploit phase. So we want to explore and learn, and then once we've learned, we want to exploit it, and exploit it big and exploit it fast. And I like that balance between those, and which phase are you in? There's another word that came in, and this is really where Thompson sampling comes in. They call it epsilon greedy as, I think, a different algorithm, but it's the idea of balancing both, exploring, exploiting a little bit better than maybe a pure A/B test or the Thompson sampling approach, which is maybe a little bit less balanced than the epsilon greedy algorithm. And I'm not familiar with that algorithm, but it's a cool one I saw a few places. So if you're curious about that stuff, dig in. I think there's going to be something pretty cool in that area. And so that last bullet, they came out the examples in the previous slide. I used a phrase because I do a lot of medical device work, industries outside of that too. But we talk a lot about in clinical studies, which I do clinical study data analysis and report writing, but we talk about surrogate measures and which surrogate measures are appropriate to understand our marketing or the interest in our product. And again, if you use it in the ultimate of, yeah, we like cash in a clinical setting, how do we know that our medical thing was appropriate? Either patients live or they die. Well, that's pretty extreme. We need a surrogate like high blood pressure means they're more likely to die. High blood sugar means, it's something different. So we use those surrogate measures, not the ultimate measure, but in a strong indicator type measure. So what surrogate measures might be appropriate in your case? I do this, again, not just in marketing, but think about it in technical situations as well. Oh, and I'm going to be quick with this because I just have a little bit of time left. But an example of a marketing design experiments, which can actually change multiple things at the same time. So we're going to change our red and our blue, long and short content, day of the week, maybe it's East Coast, West Coast. And we're going to see which combination of those 8 unique combinations is best. I've done basically 32 total tests with some strategic surrogate measures in a marketing case instead of that 800 I showed you before. If you do it well, set it up well, you're actually leveraging things really well, and you can very quickly get to that exploit stage, but be more confident you're learning enough and doing. You haven't shortcut the explore phase and begun exploiting too early. And again, even though I reduced the number of tests very strategically, I also did learn something about the depth of my marketing messages and the impact they were having.
So Perry, those who maybe not overly familiar with design of experiments, can you just highlight kind of at a high level what the DOE method really helps you do?
Yeah, what it does, it really looks at I'll call a statistically based setup of your experiment. Again, whether it's a marketing situation or a technical thing, and say it'll be a high and low level of color, which is red and blue, a high and low level of the content length, which is short or long, and then the day of the week, Tuesday, Thursday. To actually use 32, you could actually add 2 more input variables. Again, let's say there's a photo that's very technical and a photo that's maybe a little bit more funny. It's, which one's going to capture our audience better? You could have 5 of those inputs to get up to 32. And then the analysis can extract not just is red or blue better, but also is red or blue better with a shorter long content. So it can look at those combinations, or in the design of experiments world, they talk about interactions. It can look at those and extract those as well. So you get not just the individual knowledge simultaneously, but combination knowledge simultaneously. And then if you're measuring multiple outputs, the tools that I use and most tools that are available have optimizations. So you can look at what's the most satisfaction, cost, and time in the restaurant, and you can do the simultaneous optimization of the outputs as well.
So that's the word I was looking for when you're doing design of experiments, is you're looking to, in a very sort of systematic way, in a very sort of inexpensive way, to get to an optimization point, whether it be, reducing the design space down to a better choice for design, or whether it be deciding what the best direction might be for a product that you're going to develop. DOE can be used in various ways to be able to come up with the best answer when you're structuring your learning in this way.
Exactly right. And I'll add, this is kind of my example of what I've done with my business, but there's actually a book written about using design of experiments in marketing. So it's a whole book with case studies talking exactly about this topic. So if you're curious about that, let me know. We can talk more, and I can give you that book reference. So that leads into this strategic product testing, which really is the design of experiments topic in my head. But a key thing when you're thinking about product testing, what decisions need to be made, what things are going to impact my project, what are going to impact others. So I want to make sure I'm making those decisions as early as possible with data as much as possible. Setting priorities. Those priorities probably come from high risks or high things of interest from my marketing research. And you really want to do your challenging things early instead of late. I'm working with a project with there are a lot of drawings involved, and I haven't asked a question yet. I probably will tomorrow, but they've been working through their list of drawings and completing them. I'm really curious if they've done the easy ones first or the hard ones that are long lead and going to need some questions and some interaction involved. We often avoid the hard things first and we delay them, and yet that's why things get stretched out. If you do hard things early and it takes some interaction, then you're finishing up with easy things, then you can interrupt the easy things to finish off those hard things that you started early. So the first 3 bullets are really thinking about product development, but then the root cause analysis is when you have issues, and maybe it's a field issue or manufacturing yield issue, just being strategic of how you organize, think about multiple inputs, multiple outputs, combining tests when they make sense, which is the bumper sticker below. How do you get a strategic mindset for your testing, not just turning the crank and testing, because this is always how we've done testing. We've always done this test, whether it's a user test or whatever type of test. I see so many organizations just blindly do product testing with really no justification for it. It's because the most experienced guy in the group says he always did it, so I don't want to do anything different than that. That's not the best justification. So the impact on our validation strategy when we do think strategically about our tests, again, we want to explore and learn and understand our high risks early. Having some sort of baseline, we can have expected results to confirm. So if we've learned how it performs, the goods and the bads of it, then if things are within that window, then we're good. And if we're passing the spec, we have confidence that we're going to probably pass it going forward. The validation strategy, again, more on this. It really depends upon the level of risk. If it's a high risk, you need to test at the lowest level. If it's a low risk, you can actually evaluate at a higher level as a sanity check later. But high risk deserve a deeper level of understanding. And people talk about the ability to use computer simulations and such to learn deeper, but they still got to be validated, and DOE is a great tool to help with that validation. I don't know another way to do it effectively. I know a lot of ways people do it, but I don't know an effective way to do it. Again, the high risks are going to take more attention. It validates our technical understanding. We need to look at more, if it's a high risk, we may need to look at more inputs, review things a little bit closer with our vendors. But still at the end, we need to do that high level of verification. Again, we're trying to resolve that uncertainty or that risk that we talked about in that first segment. And I think I'm pretty close to winding up here. So Steve asked for a little bit more about design of experiments. I have 5 things on here. The first 4, I believe, are videos. And the last one's a white paper talking about DOE. So first one's about failure modes and effects analysis, the common design and process risk management tool. I talked more about risk management at a high level in the second video, talk about requirements in the third one, and then DOE in the fourth one. And overall, I have a YouTube channel with about 180 videos, all targeted to be about a 3 to 5 minute conversation about a variety of topics. If there's one you're curious about and you don't see, let me know. I'll probably record it. I do have several conference presentations recorded as well on various topics. Every conference or group presentation like this I've done, they're all on my publication section of my website. So feel free to dig into those and reach out with questions and make all of our product development process a lot better. So with that, think about the decisions you're trying to make. Think about the information you'd like to know to make those decisions. And then how quick can we determine this? Learn early, increase the performance and confidence moving forward. Thoughts, questions, comments?
We have a couple of minutes left. Does anybody have a question they would like to? Why don't you go ahead and stop sharing, Perry, if you would,
Sure.
and I'll stop recording.